While the world grapples with the meaning of ever-increasing populations, much continues to influence how the world will meet its challenges. Now, joining us to discuss the socio-political and demographic changes in the world and their influence on corporate strategy and on Africa specifically is Paul Laudicina. He is Global Head, AT Kearney Management Consultants. Paul, thank you for coming through.
Pleasure.
So officially now we're 7 billion people in the world. Let's speak globally and say, from where you sit, do you see policies that are designed to ensure that we will enable more and more people to step up out of poverty and join those who are living comfortable lives where we are, particularly when we refer to Africa?
Well, certainly not consistent policies. Every government, virtually every government of the world is struggling with the same issue. First, how to refuel economic growth, and secondly, how to narrow the distance between the mobile minority that have gotten very wealthy from globalization and integration and the immobile majority that has only gotten incrementally better, or in some cases worse. And so governments the world over are grappling with that, and we don't have coordination mechanisms to allow for rational global policies.
But why don't we have that mechanism at a global level? When we have got the United Nations, where you would imagine they are the institution that brings together world governments and therefore should rightly be formulating that policy and structures that need to be put in place.
It's one of the great paradoxes of globalization, that technology has allowed for this flat world that my friend Tom Friedman talks about, but at the same time, people whose lives are brought together by virtue of technology and the rapid movement of capital, goods, and ideas around the world are feeling more threatened by forces that they think are beyond their control. And so rather than reaching out, they tend to turn inward. And that's one of the paradoxes that we're having to deal with, and that political systems and economic entities the world over are challenged by.
Yeah, and so organizations like the United Nations Population Fund, which counts the number of people that there are, and in fact could be used more effectively by perhaps working with other institutions such as the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund in putting together appropriate policies to address the issues that you raise now.
No question. We need global governance mechanisms that allow countries to think medium to longer term and to reach beyond borders.
Let's move on to Africa then. Africa, of course, is the center of the world. Now, when everybody talks about Africa, everybody talks about the opportunity that globalization has created in Africa, and also talks about the opportunity that's been created by the reforms that we've been seeing being implemented in Africa in the 80s into the 90s, and how that has created a more conducive economic environment into Africa. When you look at Africa from the top, do you see structures in place to ensure that we are able to lift those that are at the bottom and bring them up into perhaps better places than where they are now?
Well, those structures are certainly, again, not evenly distributed across Africa. And the drivers of economic growth are typically population increase on the one hand and innovations in technology on the other. And I think Africa has a great resource base, both natural resources, largest mineral reserves in the world, and human resources. And the challenge is, how do you use your natural resource factor endowments to invest in the human resources, which ultimately will provide for long-term growth opportunities? And how do you leverage the bottom of the pyramid to access consumers with products that they need in ways that they can afford to buy them, to move them up through the economic ladder? That's critical for the stability of Africa and for its economic growth.
Yeah, and that growth remains very uneven, because I was just looking at the numbers before I came up here. In fact, between South Africa and Nigeria, they account for 51% of sub-Saharan Africa's total expenditure. So it's very, very uneven. And yet the numbers in both cases, particularly in the case of Nigeria, are piling up.
Right. That is true, but it is also true that if you look at the forecast for economic growth between 2010 and 2015, 8 of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world are in Africa. So Africa not only has human resources and natural resources, it also has robust growth opportunities. And all of that is what is exciting the renewed interest by investors.
And I suppose that creates opportunity for companies looking at Africa particularly. So what kind of business strategies then do companies adopt in such a case?
Well, first and foremost, I think we see in AT Kearney companies all around the world reassessing how they plan for the future. The single imperative is still grow or die. That we learned that that in Biology 101.
Yeah.
So companies are looking for new growth opportunities, places to invest, the stores of capital that they have generated through all of the transformation they've gone through over the last 2 years. But what they need to do is to develop a scenario-based strategic planning process that allows them to stay flexible and nimble and to change with what will invariably be a continuing rapid change trajectory.